Questions and some questions that we had here. David, can you give us an update on what you just heard? Because there was so much that was out there. It went from talking about how the escape happened, seeing the video, then an argument regarding funding and, of course, underfunding and underpaid. This really kind of got explosive.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we heard the sheriff basically defending what they did with limited resources and that they didn't have enough to do a general maintenance contract to be able to keep these cells from being broken through and to be able to also have a proper staffing to monitor these pods, and that they had this one civilian monitor who left to go on a break when all of this happened. And of course, it seems that these individuals knew that that was when that monitor was going to go on the break. When the monitor came back from the break, she had no idea that anybody had left. They had then gathered in a single cell and were able to escape that way. And, you know, there are 200 officers out there now. They were talking about high rewards for anybody with any information. They were also talking about protecting witnesses who testified against these inmates, one of whom was actually convicted recently of murder, and they have very grave concerns about the safety of the witnesses in those cases and of the victims in some of these other cases where people are awaiting trial. So Deputy Stephanie Minto-Gibson said that they have been working with victims to try to protect them. We heard Darlene Costanza saying that they're offering big rewards, and so too is the FBI. But again, they even brought up the CFO to talk about their the condition of what kind of funding they have, and they say that they just don't have enough to do this maintenance. And then at the end, in a very explosive moment, you heard the sheriff suggest that this was somehow political, that somehow the people escaping now or being allowed to escape was done with the knowledge or coercion or coordination with her political opponents, which was an incredible claim to make, which I tried to ask her about as she was leaving, and she wouldn't take that question. So absolutely explosive here tonight.
You know, David, we're here talking about it right now as you're mentioning this. I know that you asked a question earlier. Katie, you brought this up as well, the recordings of the iPads that all of the
inmates have tablets, and they can do video calls back and forth to their loved ones on these tablets, which is like a Zoom call. Pretty regularly in the jail. And now one of the investigative tools that they have always used is jail calls that are recorded. What was the answer when you asked them if those Zoom calls are recorded and if they're looking at those?
Well, initially the deputy said that they didn't know, or he didn't know. Then he checked and found out that yes, indeed, they are recorded. But again, if they don't have the people actively monitoring those or checking back on them, then all the recordings in the world won't make a difference if they don't have the information, or they're not monitoring to make sure that that information isn't being shared and the coordination of this escape wasn't being done in advance.
You would hope that that's what they were checking now, that they would be checking into those video messages, those jail calls, to see who they were talking to, who the last people that they were talking to. I mean, all those investigative resources that our security experts have been talking about throughout the day.
Well, David, a quick question for you. We got to the point that three employees were suspended. Do we know who they are? Is it the person that was inside of the module watching the cameras, or what?
Right, that's a very good question. We asked that. They didn't give any additional details. They said that more details would be forthcoming about who was suspended. But again, the suspensions of 3 staff members there, and we don't know whether they were because they weren't where they were supposed to be. Was it that the civilian monitor wasn't supposed to have left, or was that person allowed to have left and there should have been somebody else looking at that time? Again, they didn't have any deputy who was actively on the pod at that time, and you only had the one civilian monitor who was monitoring from a remote location inside a booth. So again, no eyes on this at the time at that location is what we're now being told.
That is shocking, I think, to anyone who heard that. Another shocking situation is, just the fact that we have executives at the jail saying that this is a minimum security facility from top to bottom, and that we have some of the most serious offenders who are either past offenders or awaiting trial, or who have been convicted, including one of these offenders who are being housed in this jail. That is shocking, I think, to everyone, that this is considered a minimum security facility from top to bottom.
And that's exactly what I asked to the warden, who said that this was designed for minimal security, but they are so overwhelmed with people who should be in high security locations that they don't have those people sectioned off. And he said that actually sometimes they have people convicted who should be then moved to state prison who are still waiting to be moved, and they are still on this more minimal security location, and that appears to be the case with Derrick Groves, although we are checking into that. But these are examples of things where they are apparently not keeping up with the demand, they're understaffed, and they don't have the ability to respond in a timely manner. You see that in the timeline and how slowly they responded, how slowly they got the information out to the public, but you also see it in sometimes these people being held in places where they shouldn't be for long periods of time, even after convictions where they should be transferred to the Department of Corrections.
David, one of the questions that I had, well, the comments rather that I had to Mike and to Clancy Dubose was 10 people in one cell and no one saw. Also, too, Alyssa Curtis is inside of here. We were all just having a conversation about that video that you got an opportunity to watch. How long did it take them to open up those cell doors? Because it seemed like the amount of time that passed by, enough that they had to speed the video up, amount of time that passed by, someone should have been in that module.
I'm here.
Right, we don't know exactly the timeline on the video because they did take these different clips, but we know that it was 12:23 a.m. where the first breakage must have happened according to the earlier press conference, and then 1:01 a.m. before they were out of the building, and then I believe they said 1:18 a.m. and they were actually going across the interstate. So that was a long period of time of something in the order of 40 minutes. Yeah, well, 40 minutes at least before they were able to scale that wall. So that's when they're inside the actual jail facility where they could have been monitored, and obviously there were video recordings of them inside the facility, and whether that was being watched actively at the time is still unclear.
I think it's obvious that there was a catastrophic delay all the way around, delay after delay after delay in this situation, and now here we are, only one of them has been recaptured at this hour.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. And as I said before, you have people who testified in court against them. You have victims in these violent crimes who are very concerned right now and are concerned for their own protection, and they have to flee the area in order to, avoid being attacked by the escaped inmates. That is the fear anyway.
Yeah, it's just such a crazy situation that we're all in, watching, waiting, wondering when we're going to see more of these inmates recaptured.
Yeah, David, I think we're going to listen a little bit more earlier. We heard from the jail CFO. This is when things got a little bit testy. We're just going to listen to some of that press conference a little bit earlier.
So right now, we can't afford a maintenance service contract. We have maintenance staff that are on board that do the day-to-day. But right now, our current budget sits at about $68 million. $41.1 million comes from the city, $13 million comes from the millage, and about $10.1 million a quarter is given to us. Right now, our payroll is about 9.6. Our food expenses is $780,000 a quarter. That eats up the money. We don't have the funding available to have a full maintenance contract to do this. We've explained this on multiple occasions. Just on Monday, we went to the City Planning Commission and we reported this out. We asked for the money to secure this. So the funding is not available to do what needs to be done.
So if your conditions are not...
Well, obviously there was a conversation about budgets there.